Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. Thanks as always for listening to Fluff and Crunch. This week, Chris and I do a review of Modiphius' Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition rules. Modiphius was kind enough to provide us with a free PDF version of the book, and so we both read through it. We've both played the first edition a number of times, and so we're going to offer our thoughts on this update of the rules. Now, if you want to jump right to where the content starts, jump to 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and that's where we get going.
Hi, Jeremy.
How are you?
I'm quite warm because I went for a run.
Good. I went for a run earlier today. I was sucking wind, actually. It was not pleasant.
But I got back like 20 minutes ago, and it was in the 20s here, so it was warm.
That's nice, actually. Did you game at all this last weekend? I did.
We played another session of ISS Vanguard, and this went very weird because we went to a planet and and then we thought, we did this mission thing that's going to be really important. And it just gave us a signal to go somewhere else. We're like, oh, okay. So we followed the signal. And then we got ambushed. And that meant we basically had to take every crew member we had and throw them into encounters. And it was super stressful. And we lost yet another security member. So Brian's now lost 3. And it was bad. And so our ship's been trashed. And so we're kind of like, right, great.
But was it fun?
It was fun, but there was points where like, this is impossible, we're never going to do it. Yeah. We did do it, but we were just getting like, oh, this is really stressful. Which is, it's good. It is, it is doing a really good job of like making us feel like we're in this game and connecting some of our characters. But,
cool.
Yeah, it's good fun.
Cool. Well, we tested out my horror game that I've been working on. We tested that out with another one-off this last weekend, and yeah, there are some things that I feel really confident about they work, and there are some things that I realize we needed to change and tweak and things like that. But what's nice is each time we've played it, the foundation gets a little broader and more solid, which I suppose is the purpose of playtesting an entirely new system. Yeah. And this weekend we're doing a different one-off this weekend. And there will be more violence in this one because I haven't had a whole lot of not a significant amount of violence. Although I did have ghost possessed carnival stuffed animals attacking the teenage protagonists in this last one. So a stuffed flaming panda bear and a clown and a 3-foot tall Batman coming after people. But it wasn't like I don't know. Need more of like a fight to see how the combat system really works out. So it was good. But that should bring us, talking about games and things like that should bring us to our topic for today, which is our overview and review of the full rulebook of Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition, which the folks at Modiphius, I really appreciate this, were kind enough to reach out to us and offer a copy of the PDF of the final version of the thing for us to look over and give our thoughts about. And so the copies that we both have were provided by Modiphius, no strings attached or anything like that.
Did they actually offer it? You didn't go back?
Yeah, no. They reached out to me and said, hey, would you and your buddy like to do this as a review? And I was like, I really appreciate that.
We've made it.
Hat tip to Modiphius, live long and prosper and all that good stuff. 384 page PDF full rulebook of Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition. So how do we want to do this? Because we have about 30 minutes.
I guess we just run kind of through the first. Yeah, I've got some notes. My notes are a page and a half. They're not. Okay, they're 2 pages. They're not massively.
Well, let's just go back and forth then.
In order.
Let's go back and forth as we've done in the past. I always like to start on the table of contents. Which where I am right now. It's nice that the table of contents is one single page. I'm a fan of one-page talks. I'm not a fan of multi-page. I just thought about that. So it's one-page table of contents I'm looking at in full. and I see it's very cute. The table of contents is broken up by color, blue, red, gold, into three general but not equal size sections of the book of background, of rules, and game mastering in that order. And I'll give my first thought. My intention, and at least from my perspective on this, is not to go through in this review and it's like this is how to play the game. You know, this is our thoughts about mainly the changes I think from the original version, and then just how the book stands on its own merits. First thing I noticed when getting into the book is a great map that would no doubt be on the inside leaves of the cover. And then you get to the table of contents, and it's a white background.
Yeah, it was literally
a
my
white
first
background with
That's
nice,
my first comment.
Yes,
white background.
White background throughout. The book format and layout is very accessible. I found the original version of it with the black background was a neat idea that I think pretty much everyone agreed just didn't work out. I don't see lots of smudged fingerprints appearing on these pages, and even more important than that is it's readable.
Yeah.
So font, page layout, it is more. It's two columns with pictures and a box here and there punctuating things, but very consistent layout.
Color the layout's good. There's a lot of nice like little sort of boxes that pop out, that call out things. So yeah, which is nice.
So I think from the jump that is a good thing in and of itself, and it is improvement over the previous version. And if you haven't listened to our Star Trek stuff I mean, I'm a big fan of Star Trek as a property. I think Star Trek Adventures is an excellent game. No game is perfect, but it is an excellent game, and I believe it is the best Star Trek role-playing game to date by a long shot. So take that in. Take my comments about this in context alongside that. So there's my first.
My first one was white background. The first thing it does, it goes into settings. We have 3 chapters on setting stuff before we go into rules. I haven't really written a lot down about the setting. It's kind of an overview, mostly because either you already know about Star Trek and therefore most of this setting isn't, you're not like super bothered, or you know nothing about Star Trek, in which case, there's setting here, which like 85 pages worth. The things I will pick out is there's a lot of this is what I would have liked, and it's not there. I would have liked a clear timeline and I've seen bits of this, and the kind of, because what it does, having gone through like the different civilizations, it goes into this errors of play thing, and it kind of gives you like, it gives you like 100-year thing, and then says like, this is kind of what was going on, and this I would have liked to like, the voyages of the original the crap Enterprise, the Scott Bakula Enterprise was these years, and the voyages of the original series was set in this period, and these I would have liked some actual dates, because I think that would have been used to go, right, well, I want to set my thing sort of in this time period. So what dates am I looking at? I mean, we've done that. We've looked, you can look it up online, but I thought that would have been a nice, it doesn't really massively hit the properties. It's not, I just kind of thought it would make your use of like, it doesn't even mention, I don't think it actually mentions Enterprise, yet it does mention the Kelvin timeline at like multiple points, which I thought was odd to mention that, but to not mention some of the other series.
It does. I'm looking, and incidentally, in terms of page count, about the first 25% of the book, almost to a page, it's almost exactly 1/4 of the book is just background. It's just fluff and setting and Star Trek stuff. On page 32, it does actually sketch out like year 2199 and prior, 2200 to 2229, 2300 to 2399, and it actually does peg the series and some of the ships and some like key moments in that. So, and that's talking about technology through the century. So
it's mostly technology though, and it just tells you that they fall in that 100-year time period. I would have liked a bit more specific, like actual dates. I mean, there are things, the Battle of Narendra in 2344, and you think tells us when the Federation Cardassian War is. So it gives us dates for specific things. I just would have liked to have the dates of.
You'd like it a little more granular, because there's at least a page per century, starting off in 2199, the era of first contact and the birth of the Federation. So there's at least a page, 1 to 2 pages per century.
Yeah, I think I would have liked a page because there's page they could have taken me out of this. I would have liked a page where it says like this TV series happened in this,
Gotcha.
and this TV series was here,
Yeah.
or something like that. Because I've seen other books where they have made explicit call outs to explicit like episodes from. I can't think which books I'm talking about, but I've definitely seen ones where like this episode is really good for this kind of thing, and I would have liked more of that, but that's not there, and it's it's just the thing. I would have liked it. It's not there. Fair enough. Um, but yeah, they do a good job of going through kind of the different things. They do go ahead. They talk about the temporal Cold War. They go into the 31st and 32nd thing to talk about the burn from Star Trek Discovery 3 and 4. They then do a huge chunk on Starfleet, which I'm not really going to go through. One thing to point out for this can be me jumping ahead and jumping back, is one of my criticisms later on will be there isn't a huge amount of stuff in the GM section for what adventures to do. It's because it's all in this Starfleet section. In this Starfleet section, they go through the Prime Directive, and then they go through like duty assignments and different kind of mission types. So if you are like, I know Star Trek, I don't need anything, and then you jump ahead to, you're reading through the rules and you read through the GM section like I often do, and you go, oh, there's not a lot in the GM section about what you should be doing. It's actually in the Starfleet section.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's a choice.
Yeah, I think I'd say in general, I think that I am more more positive on the way that it's presented in terms of the content that's provided here. In that, I think that if you're a Star Trek fan and you like to get into like the Star Trek feel of things, you want to be reminded of so many of the cool stories that are in Star Trek and cool moments and pieces of technology. Reading that first 25% of the book, putting aside the fact that it's a game, because in fact, that first 25% of the book, it really doesn't address Star Trek the game. It's just Star Trek the property. And in fact, there's nothing about rules or anything like that. And I maybe that's there, and I'm the one who harps on, story over system all the time. Maybe that's their way of establishing the primacy of, look, Star Trek, this is a role-playing game, but it's about story and character. It's not about the mechanics primarily. So they establish that from the front end.
Whatever they do, they pretty much be on a loss because there's so much Star Trek content. There are books and books and books, and there's TV series, and they could put too much in here. Well, however much they put in, it would always be too much for some people and not enough for others.
Yeah.
So whatever they do is going to be right. I think this
is a pretty good balance of stuff. I mean, when I read, and this is the one piece of the book that I read like straight through. The rest of the pieces of it I've picked and chose because I was curious. Curious, and I think it's a pretty balanced presentation. I can see where you're coming from. You're absolutely right. Yeah, there's more information that can be found, but given that realistically, this is a thick book at 384 pages. It's a beast, and you can't fit everything in it. You don't want to have like a 600-page murder weapon of a book.
What I do really like is they've thrown it. There's a page on alternate universes, which mentions the Terran universe, which I know you hate, but I just like the fact that it's, they've made it. And then there's actually like 3 pages on time travel, which again, I think is pretty cool.
I think it's a balanced take on the different kinds of stories, because time travel in the alternate universes, especially in the last few series, has been a lot more prominent. Like it was something that happened, but in previous series, like up through Deep Space Nine, but it wasn't something that was like right there in your face. The next section of the book, the next 5 chapters, which comprise over 200 pages, like 220 pages almost of the book, is rules.
Yeah.
Character creation, ship creation, technology. Finally, chapter 7, finally on page 250, you get to the rules.
Yeah, that was something I found a bit odd, that like having character creation before, it's always a choice. Do you do character creation and then the rules, or do you do the rules and character creation? And you can argue it both ways. What I found very odd was that the rules for starships and starship creation and then equipment came before the rules.
Yeah, I agree.
That I thought, because I got through all the character creation, fair enough. I now expect to find the starship. What? So, I mean, I guess they're putting an importance on.
You go through about 40% of the book. Okay, once you start reporting for duty, chapter 4, that's character creation, starts on page 95. You don't get to basic operations until page 250. And I agree with you. You can make the argument either way.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that many games will character creation comes first, but there's some mention of the core mechanic or the core system, at least related to characters, early on. I agree with you completely. And actually, the Aris, I put the core rules first, then character creation, and then like combat and stuff like that. Or did I do it in another order? Whatever. My horror game right now, I present the rules and then character creation, because I think you need to understand how the game works so that you can build a character that you want. In Star Trek, the starship is a character.
Yes,
it's a group-run character.
Yeah.
And so you've got all this stuff about characters and then all this stuff about the other main character, the ship.
Yeah.
And you don't know how the game works. I think that is an odd arrangement. And not only the fact that it's sequenced like that, but the fact that, I mean, you're talking about from page 95 to page 236 that is the two chapters, that is character creation and ship creation. Ship creation is like 60 some odd pages.
Yeah.
And you finally get to the rules. I think that's odd. Like they could have spent the core mechanic's not hard. They could have spent 2 or 3 pages at the beginning of the book saying,
I'm glad they didn't do that. Because what I don't like they've done in the past is they've had like sort of 10 pages near the start of the book, sort of really basically explaining how the rules work, but then they have to go and do it all again later. And a lot of Modiphius books have had this problem where they don't explain the rules very well at the start, and then you get onto the main core of the rules, and actually the stuff that you needed to be. I'm glad all the rules are released in one place. I'd rather at least have that. The fact that it's because you can argue it the other way, that like, if you do all the rules first, you have to read through all these rules you don't need, and then you get to the character creation, which actually explains some of the stuff in the rules. So I think whichever way you do it, I do think you can argue it either way.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't, because it's actually page count. They've done it in a bunch of their books. They've taken sort of 10 pages of explaining how like you roll dice and what traits are, but then they have to go over it all again later. So then when you're trying to refer back to it, it's not very helpful. Do I look at the start of the book? Do I do it later? So at least it's all in one place, and we get, that's not entirely true for some of it, but
yeah. And there's about about 62, 63 pages of actual rules, basic operations, advanced operations, and then all forms of conflict. That is personal, social, starship, otherwise. So that's where you find the rules about.
In terms of
2/3 of the way through the book.
Character creation. I mean, characters haven't changed a huge amount. They still have your attributes. I really like how the attributes are very clearly explained here. I seem to remember they've been like really hidden in a paragraph. They've got very clearly written out like table where they very clearly say, this is what you use this attribute for. It's very easy to read, much better than before. And then they do a similar thing for what they call departments. They used to be disciplines, but it's now departments. It's just exactly the same.
It's the same thing, yeah.
But now they have a thing where it says what the departments do, but then they also say when you would use the department with the particular attribute. So you get all of the combinations of the 6 attributes with the 6, which is really useful. I really like that.
That seems to me to be the product of several years of play feedback, like real world play feedback. And that, I think they did a really nice job of presenting that and giving you lots of examples. Not too many, but it was I'd call that a strong value add over the first edition.
And then we get like a page and a half of foci, I don't know, which is great, because in the previous game you got
you got a handful here and there, 2 or 3.
You got a few, like a paragraph. So this is great. There's loads. You can very clearly say what kind of foci you would have. So that's brilliant. We get a whole bunch of values, which again, last time we didn't get many.
Yeah.
And then we get our life path system, which again, I was never. You always told me that there was a life path system in in the first edition. I was never convinced because it just kind of felt like it was like it went through character creation and it felt like they're kind of doing a life part. This one very clearly has species, environment, upbringing, career experience, career events. It's very clearly trying to be done as a life path. It's much more explicit.
They do a
Which is
nice
nice.
job, and this you saying values and the focuses. This makes me think of this. They do. I mean, one of the things about this game that is, I wouldn't call it complex, but is deceptively challenging, is the interchangeable combinations of attributes and now departments, formerly disciplines. The fact that you can just change them out depending on the situation, and the role of focuses, the creation and role of focuses. And then you add this other thing in of values. And in a lot of ways, like that bears a resemblance to the crunchy bits of other systems, but the way that those things interplay with one another in Star Trek Adventures, I think is different. And they did a very nice job of giving examples and providing ideas. I think that someone new to the system, it would drive those things home more effectively. But again, this is just
definitely.
this to me says, hey, in the last 7 years since the game came out, we've learned a lot, and we're not just trying to throw this thing out. We're trying to improve that which is. And I think they have here.
What else have I written? Yeah, there's a new thing they've added at the end of the character creation called a character role, which is kind of like what you actually do on the ship. And you get this like, basically it's an extra like mini talent that goes with it, which is cool because that wasn't there last time. We actually get like get clearer things for rank, which a lot of this stuff is just better presented. We still get creation in play, which is good.
Yep.
And we still get supporting characters, which is, again, I mean, for us, if supporting characters hadn't existed as a rule, we never would have played Star Trek Adventures because it's me and 2 players.
Yeah.
So it's just impossible. Supporting characters meant we could make like 3 main characters and then made a bunch of supporting characters, and we could just play, and it was like playing like the actual, the TV series, whatever. It was great. And without supporting characters being an idea, that would have been impossible, essentially. Yeah. So I'm super glad that's still there. And then we get a whole bunch of talents as well. And again, there's just looking at the book, it's so much easier to read.
Yeah.
Just so much easier.
Looking at chapter 5, starships, everything is, I mean, all the things that were in the previous edition, the idea of, a space frame and then mission profiles, ships have talents, different kinds of, all that's there. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how much stuff content has been added here from the Division books. Like, are there some starship things that I don't know. But it is about a 60-some page block of the book that is just starships of different sorts. And obviously adapted to the new no challenge dice version of the game. And I look at that chapter 5, your home among you. Oh, actually, that's funny. It says the table of contents does not say your home among the stars. It says you home among the stars. You home among the stars. Oh, there's a typo in my edition, or my version of the PDF. Anyway, I look at the starship section or chapter as being analogous in improvements and call them value-adding changes that we saw in the character creation chapter.
Yeah. I'm still going through it on weaponry, and I'm still going. And then we get small craft as well, so not just the big boys. Yeah, then we get the equipment section, which is kind of weird because it's like, well, we still haven't got to the rules, but anyway. But yeah, we have equipment, and
Let's get to those rules.
We do have equipment for other things, but then we get to the rules. I mean, kind of the first thing that you're missing from the rules is it's the thing you don't notice because it doesn't say there's no challenge dice.
Right,
it's just
don't need to.
Because it's not a thing. So if you're coming to this game new and you've never played first edition, it's not a thing.
All you're using your D20s. That's it.
Yeah. So this is the thing where I was massively thrown. The very first thing we start off with, it says scenes and traits, and explain what's it, and it goes in and explains traits. And it tells us different kinds of traits: situation, location, character, equipment traits. It tells us how to word traits, because I am such and such, this activity is. And again, it tells us that the words are easier, harder, possible, impossible, or unchanged. and then you turn over the page and it talks about changing traits and potent traits. And then we go into tasks, and it hasn't actually told us
How tasks work.
well, what traits do? Yeah, tasks one on there. It doesn't
That's
mechanically tell it. I literally messaged Jeremy at this point and went, it doesn't tell you mechanically what. Now, actually, it then does say, see page 321 for additional guidance on traits. That's in the GM section. If you go to that, it then tells you that because we've played other 2D20 games, we know what traits do.
Yeah.
They either increase or decrease the difficulty by 1 or more because of potency now,
right.
or they make things possible or impossible. But at that point, I was like, I found it really odd it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I guess it's in the GM section because the GM sets the difficulty, but it seemed very odd to have spent 2 pages explaining what traits are and then not actually mechanically say what they do.
And not address the actual core mechanic, which comes next. I think they did a better job of describing traits. Traits are so important to this game and such a great bridge between the narrative, the story, and the mechanics. They're terrific. However, they're not normal in terms of gaming. Like no version of D&D you have modifiers. The modifiers, you modify things because of traits, but traits are not modifiers. Traits are part of the story. And so this explanation, which is concise, it is not wordy, is really useful. But I agree with you. But then they finally, on page 253, they finally get to how to play the game as a game. That is, what the heck do I do with these dice? They explain how tasks are handled, which I don't think we need to go into the details of the how, because our point here is not to teach people how to play the game. That said, it is a basic 2D20 mechanic. It's really straightforward. It's simple. It's flexible. I like it.
I do like that they do a little box out here. They do actually try to, again, do what most games are doing nowadays, modern game design, to say, the players say what they want to do, and the GM decides, can you do it? Can you not do it? Or is it a maybe? And it does try and say, look, only roll when it's a maybe.
Yeah.
But then it gives us, of course, difficulty 0 task, which is the kind of, well, actually, even if it's a yes, you could still roll.
Something interesting could happen here. Yeah.
I say another one of these things, I think even if you wrote that in giant double size font in capital letters and in bold, you would still get GMs that go, you roll for everything.
Well, but the book, that's
not the book's fault.
I mean, the GM's going to do what the GM's going to do.
But we get this little box out here for observation, which I thought was might make the point that actually one of the most common things you do in a game is rolling to see, do you see something? And it's putting here, look, the difficulty of an observation task should be low, with the idea being that the more successes you get, the more stuff that you see.
Yeah.
Rather than just going, oh, well, they failed a perception check. Yeah, you don't see the thing.
Yeah.
The idea was here, you kind of like, well, I could set observation check to always be difficulty 0.
Yeah. And their explanation of how to use the system is much more effective in this than the previous version. They also provide more notional game examples in orange font, and they stand out. And they explain how the system works in little Star Trek examples. Love that.
Yep.
On page 257, there is a 1-page 7-step flowchart of attempting a task.
Very good. Yeah.
Brilliant. Print it out, hand it to your players.
Yeah.
And
then we get complications, momentum. We get a lot of stuff on momentum and common spends. We get very clear rules on determination and threat, which is strange because threat comes up again later. We get 2 pages of babble. We get Trekno babble and medical babble, which is awesome.
Yes.
Stuff, which is really, really useful. And then we get advanced operations. So advanced operations has one thing that is new and one. The thing that's not new is extended tasks. To my knowledge, extended tasks existed in 2E. Challenges is, for want of a better way to explain it, if you've ever played D&D 4th edition, it's a skill challenge in that, where you have like a skill test followed by a skill test for a different skill, followed by another skill test for a different skill. That's what it is, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's a new addition. It's a nice way to break things up. It gives an example here of B'Elanna Torres trying to restart the Voyager's warp core, which hopefully she fails and it's blown up and they all die. But,
only Janeway.
No,
And
I still
Chicote
probably
too.
haven't.
You can take him too. I like this. The
Anyway,
challenges are interesting. The challenges are
yes.
an interesting way to handle a situation where multiple different kinds of roles should be made. I could see where you could potentially involve multiple characters of
Yeah.
different types. Your
Yeah.
science officer, your medical officer, your engineer, all together. By the way, we have 7.5 minutes.
Okay, we'll get move on. Yeah, I think that's really good. Extended tasks are expanded on a bit
Right.
more than previously. We have this idea of breakthroughs, where you have a track, and depending on when you hit it, and then the GM section explains that.
And
We get 2 examples of expended task, and then we
good.
go into conflict. So
Before we move to conflict, though, I want to say that I think
I want to jump up and down, and now this is where I'm going to start going.
the adjustment away from challenge dice actually I think makes extended tasks a lot easier. It
That's
makes
not
them
my issue,
it
but
makes
yeah,
them
it is.
simpler.
It does. So, Jeremy, what's
Yes.
my favorite bit about, apart from supporting characters, what is my singularly favorite thing about first edition?
First edition Star Trek Adventures.
Yes. And I
I
think we actually did a whole episode on it.
The scientific method.
The scientific method. The scientific method was this brilliant idea
So
in first
cool.
edition where you have the GM says, here's the problem. There's a phase shift anomaly off the starboard bow.
Right, and the crew are turning into like green goo.
Yeah. And you had to, the players would all come up with an idea, and the GM would say, I like that one better. And then you would do a bunch of rolls, and you'd like make progress to solving the problem. And it was a clever idea, and it was really well explained.
And
It wasn't
you as
super well explained.
GM would have no clue what was really
Yes.
causing it, but then the
Yeah, it didn't
players
matter.
would come to this
Yes.
idea and they think they unraveled your mystery, and then you get the credit and they have the fun and everybody's happy.
It's gone. It's not in it.
Yeah.
There is no scientific method. Now, luckily, it wouldn't take very long to rewrite the first edition scientific method rules into something which would work with extended tasks or challenges.
Yep.
But it's gone. And
Yeah.
it's literally, I am not joking when I say, to me, scientific method is the thing that made Star Trek Adventures first edition feel like Star Trek. Because in most Star Trek episodes, there's some weird problem. They sit around, they come up with a bunch of ideas, like House, they try a bunch that don't fail, and then they get to the correct.
Yep.
It's just brilliant idea.
And here's
I
the
loved
thing,
it, and it's gone.
You just made a really good point. You could handle this with an extended task, although it wouldn't be the same. You could handle it with a challenge, it would be closer to. There is nothing about the scientific method in first edition that mechanically is novel. All
Yes.
it is, it's an interesting use of the existing core mechanic. All it does is it takes the core mechanic and it sequences it and it treats it in such a way, GM to players, to create this vibe of scientific or engineering or whatever discovery. I agree with you completely. That there's no reason that this is not in here. I don't get it, because that is there is absolutely nothing in this game that prevents you from doing it. But someone coming to this game from the outside, someone who I hadn't played first edition, would not necessarily maybe think to put it in that to create a challenge that runs like that. I agree with you completely.
So I was pretty annoyed at that. Anyway, so that's gone, which is intent. Conflict rules. I mean, essentially, because they got rid of challenge dice, combat's a little bit quicker.
Yep.
One thing that is a bit odd is, because I think it's different. I seem to remember that in first edition, if you got hit, you took an injury, and if you took so many, took an injury, you could be out.
If you took 5 points of damage.
Yeah. So this now has stress. And stress is based on your fitness. But when you take an injury, you can choose not to take the injury, which would put you out. You choose to take stress instead.
Yeah.
But the damage is reduced. And it's like, I don't know why they just didn't go, when you get hit, you take stress. And when you've taken more stress than your fitness, you are injured. It seems this extra level, it's actually the one place in combat where I think they actually made it more complicated than previously.
Yeah.
It
It seems a tad bit
weird.
fiddly. Now, I have not played this. I haven't played it. I haven't run it. So I can't comment on how does it play at the table when everyone's proficient with it. I don't know. But reading it, it seems a little like I don't get it.
Yeah.
And
I was a bit like that.
Maybe it was one of these things where, how sometimes when you open up something in a meeting, all of a sudden changes get made that you didn't necessarily plan to make, but just that ended up on the table. Now let me throw in a very positive thing about the conflict chapter is, much like the task resolution, the one-page flowchart of the task resolution, they have those for attacks, for starship combat, and I had seen people years ago when Star Trek Adventures came out put together like printable PDF one-page cheat sheets for various activities. Modiphius has now done the fine job of doing it, and doing it without some kind of dreadful printer-killing black background. It's just white background, nice and simple. You could print this out. Everybody has, especially for starship combat. Lots of different ideas for what different characters on the ship can do. I think that, again, they have learned how to explain some of these things more effectively, and it shows here.
Yeah, I think Starship Combat is a weird one because it still looks complicated-ish because each of the different positions
Sure.
has like a whole bunch of actions, but a lot of the actions, like almost everyone has a create trait.
Yeah.
Okay, the helm gets a bunch of different things, but it doesn't look as complicated. And things like so previously, like moving power levers and all this had like a whole bunch of stuff you had to track. Now it's mostly like, right, well, you choose to put power to a particular system, and then that system gives you like a success or something when you use that system. So they've made that kind of thing simpler.
They've streamlined it, and not in a bad way.
Yeah, and the damage is like a lot simpler. Like you take your shields get damaged, and then when your shields are run out, you take breaches to particular systems. If a system has so many breaches, you can't use it to roll. So it's so it's a lot. It's like way easier. They then give and this is the brilliant thing. They give us a whole one-page Starship Combat example, because I'd looked through the chapter. I'm like, well, I'm not really sure I get this. And then I read that one-page combat example, and I was like, okay, no, this seems much more straightforward.
Yeah.
Again, you already said it. Without playing it,
but overall it looks
better.
We have less than a minute.
Yeah, so that looks better.
Here's my top level. The game mastering chapters are shorter but pretty straightforward. My top level is this is to me less a second edition than a smoothing out and an improvement of the game itself. They're calling it second edition, but this is still Star Trek Adventures. I think that this is a step up and forward from an already really good game. There are things I could nitpick about, but overall, I think that this is a step forward.
I think
a clear step forward.
The take that I would have, and kind of based on what you said earlier, if you're a new player coming into this, I would definitely get this. It's a really good version of the 2D20 rules. A lot of it's very well explained, and it does a really good job of Star Trek. If, however, you already have first edition and you're perfectly happy with it, I don't think you need this book.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. But I'll give. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.